Gabriel is a self-motivated game designer with a knack for time management, and he makes games from start to finish, including concept, design docs, prototypes, artwork programming, sound design testing, publishing, and he does, in fact, dream of game design mechanics. Gabriel, how are you doing today?
I'm well, thank you, Jason. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I've fully recharged from lunch, so I feel good. All
Great to hear.
right. Are we, so what do you have for us today?
Okay, well, hello and welcome everybody to this online presentation about how you can use AutoHotKey to accelerate development. If you do have a question at any point, please feel free to post it in the chat, and I will do my best to answer everything towards the end of the presentation. So my name is Gabriel, and here's a little bit of info about me. I've been making games here in Toronto since I was 10 years old. I've published 16 games under the studio name of Bluish Green Productions, 2 of which are up on Steam. I've also produced 64 episodes of a game design podcast called Gameology with my co-host, games journalist Matthew Falvey. I've been using AutoHotKey for just a couple years, but it's already helped me cut out countless hours of work and become an indispensable part of how I use computers. So here is a quick outline of what you can expect from this presentation. We'll start with an introduction of what AutoHotKey is and a quick overview of what it can do. From there, I'll be sharing a series of anecdotes on problems I've solved with AutoHotKey and key lessons I learned as I worked towards a solution. My goal with this presentation is to give everyone watching the idea of the kinds of problems you can solve with AutoHotKey. Even if you don't end up using those ideas directly, you can get a sense of how you can adapt the program to fit your needs. So to be clear, this is not a presentation on how to program your own hotkeys, so I won't be getting into any syntax. At the end, I'll have a summary of the 10 lessons, and we'll move on to Q&A. So let's start with a basic definition of what AutoHotKey is. According to AutoHotKey's own website, it is a scripting language for Windows that allows users to easily create scripts and accelerate or automate tasks. Okay, but what is it? Fundamentally, it's a program that lets you create your own hotkeys. You can use it to remap hotkeys when that functionality doesn't exist within a program. You can use it to replace uncomfortable or hard to reach, hard to remember hotkeys. And you can also, of course, replace hotkeys which are both hard to remember and difficult to press. I'm looking at you, Google Docs, with your Alt-Shift-5 shortcut to put a strike-through effect on text. Using AutoHotKey's unique scripting language, you specify a keyboard key and what you want the key to do. You can run these scripts on a computer with AutoHotKey installed, or you can compile them into an exe so they will run on any PC. These scripts are basically lightweight programs which run in the background on your computer. But AutoHotKey can do so much more than simple key remapping. It can move your cursor, generate clicks or keystrokes, open folders, launch programs or web pages. And from a programming perspective, AutoHotKey has the ability to store values and variables. You can declare and call functions, pass command line arguments, call external scripts, and even create graphical user interfaces. The things you can do with AutoHotKey can be downright magical, but you may have an issue using it in certain work environments where companies do not let you install custom software on their computers. It's worth mentioning that AutoHotKey itself is generally regarded to be safe, but like any programming language, someone could use it to write malicious code. It freaked out one of my employers when they saw that one of the utilities that comes with AutoHotKey is literally called Windows Spy. So when in doubt, you can avoid using other people's scripts and write things yourself so you understand 100% of what the program is doing. Anyway, this is all pretty abstract, so to give you a general sense of how flexible AutoHotKey can be, here are some practical uses I've found for it. The first time I ever used AutoHotKey was back when I was making a game with GameMaker. When I was using the level editor, I would block out platforms by scaling a square block using a grid. However, due to an unresolved bug in the program, sometimes these blocks would not scale to even integer values. They wouldn't snap to the grid. So you can see this square right here has a size of 3.43 by 3.43. So To fix this, I would have to manually click inside this box and backspace to get rid of the numbers after the decimal here and here. And this obviously gets really tedious when it occurs really frequently throughout development. So this is where I was first inspired to use AutoHotKey, since I had heard that it could send these kind of keystrokes almost instantaneously. So I installed AutoHotKey, read through a few guides, and without too much trouble, I got this result. Okay, so not bad, but once I had it sending the keystrokes in the right order, I could get rid of all the delays. So here's the same hotkey. Try not to blink. Okay, so I would describe this as a pretty typical use for AutoHotKey. It's a great example of our first lesson. With AutoHotKey, you can automate tasks, cut down on keystrokes, and save time. So no real surprise there. It does what it says on the tin. Sometime after writing my first hotkey, I ran an HDMI cable from my PC to my TV so I could play games on a larger screen from further away. After I got everything hooked up, I realized that some program on my computer kept interrupting the game and forcing it to minimize. I was having a lot of trouble finding the culprit, so instead, I got around the issue with a new hotkey that I added to my script. I made it so that pressing both the shoulder buttons on my Xbox controller would perform a press of Alt-Tab, which is, of course, the Windows shortcut for switching between active programs. This meant that I can simply press the buttons on the controller until the game reopened, and I wouldn't have to walk back over to my PC and switch back to the game manually. It might be a bit of an unorthodox solution, but this brings us to lesson 2. Operating systems and programs can suffer from occasional hiccups, which detract from your PC usage experience. Even if you can't fix the cause of the problem, you can use AutoHotKey to patch things up and add to your quality of life. One quality of life improvement, which I think the greatest number of people could use, is a free autocorrect dictionary made with AutoHotKey. It contains a dictionary of roughly 5,000 common misspellings. As you type, it instantly corrects typos, including ones where you've hit 2 keys out of order, like EHLLO would correct to hello. So let me demonstrate this. If I type EHLLO without anything else, it just corrects to the right word. And you can freely edit this dictionary yourself. Unlike autocorrect on your phone, you can add to it or remove items from it. It works across all programs. And one of my favorite uses for this is the ability to type out key phrases that autocorrect to something completely different. For example, if I type full name like this, it autocorrects to my full name with quotes around Gabriel. So this is known in AutoHotKey as a hot string, and it's a great way to get started with the program because they're very easy to write. Now, not long after I wrote my Alt-Tab script, I found an opportunity to use AutoHotKey at the print shop where I worked part-time. Every time we finished an order and I went to print an invoice, it would default to a single-sided color print. I wrote a hotkey which would instantly switch to printing black and white, double-sided, which saved the company roughly 30 cents per page. Now that might not seem like much, but in the time that I was with the company, they printed over 5,300 invoices. So at minimum, this would have saved the company around $1,600. Slowly but surely, I started to notice other tasks I could optimize or automate. For example, one frequent client which we got would send us a batch of files with identical print instructions each time. So to go through each file and correctly enter the settings could easily take upwards of 10 minutes. And you needed to be careful not to get anything wrong, or you'd have to reprint it. I wrote a hotkey which looked at the file name and used that to apply the correct print settings. Needless to say, this was more reliable, and it let me fly through a batch of files in under 2 minutes. Eventually, I got it to a point where one single hotkey would download the email from the client along with all attachments into a date-stamped folder on the network-attached storage. It would iterate through each file and print everything with the correct settings. Then it would launch the accounting software and input the file names with the correct number of pages. Finally, it would export the invoice and print a copy using the original shortcut I had written. I was now able to run entire orders start to finish in a quarter of the time it took me before I'd written the hotkeys. The only problem is that I was the only one who used the hotkeys. So on days where I wasn't at the print shop, the other members of the production team would go back to doing everything manually. This brings us to lesson 3. You can use AutoHotKey to solve problems for yourself, but it's very difficult to write hotkeys for others. Most of the time, people get very attached to their workflows, and they're reluctant to change them, even if you give them a way which is more efficient. So, as the saying goes, you can write a hotkey for a horse, but you can't make them use the hotkey. The hooves tend to mash like 5 or 6 keys at a time. So, oh well. Even if I couldn't convince others to use the hotkeys I wrote, I found plenty of other uses for AutoHotKey in my personal projects. This presentation, for instance, was made with generous use of a hotkey that I wrote to toggle font color. Of course, Google does not provide a keyboard shortcut for this, so I had to write a hotkey which moved the cursor and made it select the color I wanted from the palette. For any Unity developers out there, I wrote a similar script to toggle the inspector lock since it also does not have a keyboard shortcut. So, lesson 4 is you can use AutoHotKey to accelerate and automate a program even if it doesn't have keyboard shortcuts. But for reasons I'll touch upon later, I would recommend using the mouse as a last resort and writing macros with keyboard shortcuts wherever possible. Next, I'd like to talk about a few related functions I created by remapping keys on my keyboard. Firstly, I have a keyboard with a pretty small backspace key, and the insert key is right next to it. I found that I would often end up hitting insert by mistake when I meant to hit backspace. So I just remapped insert to behave as backspace. I'll show this in the Google Doc I had from before. So if I have my name here, I can even pull up the on-screen keyboard, and you can see that as I click the word insert, like this, it's actually backspacing the letters that I typed out. So another key that I'd remapped was a sleep key, because once again, my keyboard did not have a sleep key. So I looked at my keyboard and there's this pause break key that I never use. So I made pause into sleep. And it might not seem like much, but having a single key that I can just press in place of clicking start, power, sleep is really nice. And I can press the key even if I have my monitor turned off. Needless to say, I'm not going to press this one to demonstrate it. Then I've got my caps lock key, which I don't use caps lock. I hold shift with my pinky finger if I need to. So I just remapped caps lock into something else useful. So here's this misspelled word here. If I press caps lock, it instantly goes and performs the right click correct to top option there. And I can keep both my hands on the keyboard. As another bonus, here I've got a word with the second letter capitalized when I didn't want it to. If I press Alt tilde, like this, not Alt tab, Alt caps lock. There we go. Nope. Alt caps lock. Try that again. There we go. See, that's the thing. AutoHotKey doesn't always work, but you can see it removed the extra capitalized letter there from the word world. And as long as your web browser has an active spell check, like Google Docs or really any text field, that right-click shortcut will also work. So all this taken together constitutes lesson 5, which is you can take the keys which you never use or use very infrequently and give them new purpose that are specific to your needs. If I go back to my slide on my print shop keys, you can see the reason the keyboard is covered in tape is because all of those are keys that I've given alternate functions or remapped completely. Now, another hotkey that I wrote for myself as an attempt to create a quality of life feature is a comics hotkey. As I was reading the backlog of this webcomic, I found myself constantly editing my bookmark to update my progress. I decided to make a hotkey which would grab the current URL, copy it, open up the bookmark to edit it, paste in the new URL, jump to the index, these numbers at the very end, and increment it by 1. This way, I would save the bookmark of the next page as opposed to the page I had just read. So how much time did I spend writing this hotkey that was meant to save me about 5 seconds? Literal hours. I could not find a reliable way of accessing bookmarks, and it took a lot of trial and error to get it to work. Now, there are over 3,000 of these comics that are still being published. So in the long run, Hopefully, I'll eventually break even on the time it took me to write the hotkey, but this brings us to our next lesson. It's a caution that you can spend way too long trying to solve a problem with AutoHotKey. So before you write a new script, you really need to think for a moment. Is this worth the savings in time? A good rule of thumb is to consider the ratio between how often you would use the hotkey and how much time it saves you. If you use it constantly, it's worth it, even if it only saves you a few seconds at a time. If you don't use it as often, it had better save a lot of time for it to be worthwhile. And sometimes you won't know if you're wasting your time until you're an hour and a half in with 20 browser tabs open, trying to root through forum threads and software documentation, because if you give up now, it will have all been a waste. So yeah, do your best not to fall prey to the sunk cost fallacy. Catch yourself and hit the eject button. So most of the hotkeys I've discussed so far are related to using the keyboard. But actually, the set of functions that I'm most proud of and the ones I use the most often are the ones I've programmed for my mouse. If you look at a regular 3-button mouse, you've got left click, right click, middle click, plus the ability to scroll up and down, so a total of 5 functions. Using AutoHotKey, I was able to map out a total of 20 functions. Okay, so to be fair, I started with a 5-button mouse, and the software actually that came with the mouse would let me remap the 4th and 5th mouse buttons to some other function further. I treated the 4th and 5th mouse buttons as custom modifier keys like Control, Alt, or Shift. Those keys would then change the functionality of the other 3 mouse buttons and the scroll wheel. So let me demonstrate this in Visual Studio. If I hold the 4th mouse button down and I left click, I get backspace. If I hold that same button down and right click, I get delete. I can also go up a folder with middle mouse, and the scroll wheel becomes my left and right arrow keys, so I can rapidly scroll through things like this. Then, if I use mouse 5, it sends a double-click copy. And if I press middle mouse, I get enter, and then right-click is double-click paste. If I left, then right-click, I cut. And if I use the scroll wheel, I get the up and down arrow keys. So this way, most of the functions that I normally need to press on the right side of the keyboard are ones that I can now press by keeping my hand on the mouse. Specifically, that backspace shortcut is one of the ones I probably use the most often. If you have a 5-button mouse, even if you don't touch AutoHotKey, I would highly recommend putting backspace on one of your extra mouse buttons. So will I ever go out and buy a mouse with more than 5 buttons? Well, I don't really need to, because for my less frequently used functions, I created what I call the FunctionPad. On a simultaneous press of both my 4th and 5th mouse buttons, I get a special window which opens centered on my cursor. The functions in this window, the size and the placement of the buttons, are all defined with AutoHotKey. From here, I can quickly access a number of functions, like this one, which helps me wrap my selection and my multi-line comment. If you're a web developer, you could absolutely use the same idea to wrap your selection in a HTML tag of your choice. So you might ask, do I remember to use all of these? And the answer is, for the most part, at least the ones that I use the most often. These functions along the top of the function pad that I call workspaces, I use these all the time. With a single click on any one of these buttons, I can launch Unity, Visual Studio, project-specific folders, and even web pages related to the development of whatever project I'm currently working on. Having this custom multifunction mouse opened up a whole new ethos in programming for me, which is Lesson 7. You can be a developer and use a mouse. To explain, I've heard a lot of developers say that you should constantly keep both hands on the keyboard, learn your keyboard shortcuts, and barely, if ever, touch the mouse. But I've always found that it's easier to highlight things and place my text cursor where I want if I use the mouse. But if that's never felt quite right to you, then you can try out this methodology instead. Another hotkey which I created and that I use for development is my custom Snippets menu. A single key press opens a drop-down menu of my most commonly used code snippets in Visual Studio. So let me get that back open here. Nearly every item in this list has a letter designated, which I can use to select it instantly. So, for example, let's say I've created a new script and I want to clear out this sample code. Well, first, I'm going to copy the class name. I would have to select all, and then I type nclas, which is a code snippet I wrote in Visual Studio. Then I press tab twice, paste in the class name, and there, I'm done. But AutoHotKey can do this for me even faster. So I'm going to undo all that. And now I'm going to press tilde and N for new class. And you can see in the blink of an eye, AutoHotKey iterated through all those same steps, but even faster. So this brings us to our 8th lesson, which is you can use AutoHotKey to easily integrate into any program, layer on top of existing tools, or help you bridge the gap between two programs. For the next few hotkeys, I have for the few hotkeys that I have distributed around my keyboard, most of the functions are actually consolidated onto a single tilde key. Tilde is easily accessible with my left hand, and it also happens to be a key which I often don't use for its intended purpose. If I need two hotkeys in a program, I'll use tilde for the main hotkey, one I use less often. In Google Slides, to color the text yellow like this, I press tilde. And then to color it white again, I can press Alt tilde. If I need more than two functions, I simply pop open a drop-down menu, like the Snippets menu that I had in Visual Studio. What makes tilde quote-unquote magical is that one key performs different functions based on which program I have open. I simply use AutoHotKey to look at the window title, and based on that, I have some branching logic dictate which function to perform. Incidentally, this is what you use the window spy utility for. It's to find the window title and other useful information, like your cursor's position on screen and even what colors underneath your cursor. This brings us to lesson 9. You can use AutoHotKey to read file names, window titles, and even parse the current folder directory you have and have it perform context-specific functions. This way, your keyboard isn't littered with a bunch of hotkeys that might accidentally start doing something weird outside of the program they're intended to be used in. So, our last lesson today was the first lesson that I learned when I first discovered AutoHotKey. It was mentioned in a great video by Tom Scott entitled The Art of the Bodge, How I Made the Emoji Keyboard. In the video, Tom describes AutoHotKey as an excellent way to solve problems, even if the result is a bodge. Bodge is defined as a clumsy or inelegant job, usually a temporary repair or patch. Most, if not all, of my hotkeys fit this description, especially the ones where I need to rely on the mouse cursor to move and click on something. Those scripts will fail if you're moving the mouse cursor, don't have the program maximized, the software layout changes, or if I use a differently sized monitor. And you even saw in the course of this presentation, I tried to use my caps lock key, and it ended up doing something that I didn't intend. It does work most of the time. And of course, I tested it so many times before this presentation went live, but it had to fail live. But, you know, such is the way of things. So this is lesson 10. AutoHotKey is not a perfect solution, but it's the most perfect, imperfect tool that I've ever used. As long as you acknowledge that AutoHotKey is imperfect and the things that you make with it will be imperfect, then you'll be fine. Don't spend forever trying to write code which is 100% airtight. And if you're trying to use AutoHotKey in a situation that demands a higher level of reliability, then maybe you shouldn't be using AutoHotKey. So, for example, here are some bad uses of AutoHotKey. Defibrillate patient. Invest life savings. Bad idea. Fire the missiles. Also don't do that. But hey, every tool ever made is going to have some imperfection. And the shortcomings of AutoHotKey have not stopped me from being able to use it to great effect. Thank you very much. Now, as promised, here is our summary slide with all 10 lessons. You can use AutoHotKey to automate tasks, cut down on keystrokes, and save time. You can improve your PC usage experience through quality of life improvements. You can save time and money if everyone's on board to use it. You can use the mouse to get around a lack of keyboard shortcuts. You can give unused keys on your keyboard a new purpose. You can spend way too much time trying to solve a problem. You can be a developer and use a mouse. You can integrate it with existing tools and read file names and window titles to make your hotkeys contextual. As I said, AutoHotKey is not a perfect solution, but it's the most perfect imperfect tool I've ever used. At this point, I hope you're excited to try AutoHotKey or recommend it to someone who might be interested. You can download AutoHotKey from its official website, autohotkey.com, and the quick start guide on the website is a great place to start. On my YouTube channel, I'll be posting this presentation as well as a series of videos on how you can get started writing your own hotkeys. So you can search Bluish Green Pro to find me on YouTube. You can also visit my website, bluishgreenproductions.com, for additional game development resources and to see the games that I'm currently developing. You can get in touch with me on Twitter or LinkedIn, and I'll leave this slide up, and we will have some time for questions now, so please feel free to type in chat, and I'll respond to as many as possible. We've got plenty of time. So I'm going to take a look at the chat here. I'd also be happy to discuss some of the other hotkeys that I've created, some of the other solutions that I found that didn't quite make the cut for the core presentation. So I'll just wait a moment to see if anyone has any specific questions they'd like me to address.
While we wait, I have one question for you.
Absolutely.
So how did you learn about this tool? Like, is this something you were actively looking for to save time, or was it a recommendation?
So the way that I learned about AutoHotKey through that video that Tom Scott mentioned it, is how he created the emoji keyboard. And just as a, necessity is the mother of invention. So I found myself in a lot of these circumstances. The very first time that I ever used AutoHotKey in a professional setting at the print shop was to insert blank pages into a long PDF document, because they had these pages which would be end of section headers, and when you flip open these double-sided pages, they would expect end of section to be on its own page with a blank behind it. So we would use Adobe Acrobat to right-click insert blank page. And then I thought, there's probably a keyboard shortcut for this. And I figured it out. But it was like Control-Alt-T or something, really hard to press with your fingers. So I said, okay, hang on. There's this program, AutoHotKey. I'm going to make it so that if you press Control numpad, you will insert, or Control 0 on the numpad, you will insert a blank page. And then I will jump to the next page. So eventually I had it where holding down Control, I could navigate the PDF by just using 4 and 6, so going left and right. I would press 5 to insert a blank page, 8 to delete a page if I made a mistake, and then some other functions on there. So it just sort of grew out from there. I just kept learning more about the program as I kept using it to solve new problems. So a lot of that was learned on the job at the print shop. And then eventually I was able to transition all that knowledge into my home experience using the program. So I see a couple other questions are coming in here. Any hotkeys have I done to streamline deployments or continuous integration workflows? Quite honestly, yeah, continuous integration workflows. I'm not actually super familiar with the terminology, but I can say that I've used it. You could make a hotkey to export something or publish it. Most of the time I'm using AutoHotKey in the context of developing with Unity. And you could make a hotkey to create a build with it. I've used AutoHotKey when I'm importing a sprite into Unity. There's a whole bunch of sprite settings that you need to fill in. And I created a keyboard macro that fills all that information in automatically. So that's definitely one alternate use I have for it. Let's see. One thing, AutoHotKey can actually run other AutoHotKey scripts as well. So if you're ever in the midst of trying to prototype a new hotkey out, what you can do is you can write a hotkey that is compiled, that is programmed to call another hotkey script. so that you can just continuously make edits to the one that you're developing, hit save, and then the compiled script will call the non-compiled script and you can test it out. However, once you've got it working, I would recommend grabbing that code and putting it into the compiled script. For example, the ongoing, like all of my hotkeys are in one massive file that's 1,400 lines long, because I tried breaking those scripts out into other programs, and what I found was they run a little bit slower. So if I am used to pressing a key and having it work immediately, by calling it from an external script, it would run like half a second slow. And when you're used to that immediate function, you want it to continue to work that way. So I would do my best to, you can write keys in an external script and test them out that way, but then integrate them into just one single massive script if you can. So let's see, do we have any other questions here?
I have one more.
So for sure.
In the context of your development, and I know this might be hard to quantify, but would you have an estimate of how much time you saved? So not including your print shop experience, but on the game development side?
Right. Well, a lot of it comes down to, like, here, I'll get Visual Studio back open, and you can see if I want to create like a public method, let's just say for method, and then I'll tab into that, and I want to create an if-else statement, and maybe I want to have a new using statement at the top here. Like, you can see that snippets are incredibly powerful, and they represent the bulk of the time savings that I'm getting here. But the typical way of getting a snippet to work in Visual Studio is with this, like, start to type out the letters and then double tab. Why press that many keys when you can just press one key and then a letter? Like, that's, again, it's not much in the way of time savings, but I use it so frequently that it adds up really quickly. So do I have like an overall estimate for how much time it saved me? Not really, but it's one of those things that adds up surprisingly quickly, in the way that saving 30 cents per page printed might not seem like very much, but when you print thousands of those pages, then it adds up to a substantial sum of money. Yeah, I agree with the specific commenter here saying that having things clear helps to keep your mind clear. It's like having a messy desk. You can't see my desktop, but even my computer desktop has like the recycle bin and one file on it. I like to keep everything super clean and tidy. I know that a lot of these AutoHotKey, writing these kind of scripts and getting this kind of optimization is something that only a specific kind of developer will want to participate in. For most people, it might seem like too much time in for the time savings that you get out, but it's quite simple to program. If anyone is interested in the chat, I can actually call open an example script if anyone wants to see it. I just wanted to sort of leave that on to the end of the presentation so I could make sure I had time to get through everything.
Personally, that's something I wouldn't mind seeing. So
absolutely.
You get my vote.
Okay. Well, here's a good example. I'm going to open up the very first script that I ever wrote. This is the one that I used in GameMaker. And if I can get into the right folder directory, because it's hard to talk and click on things at the same time. Here we go. So I edit all of my AutoHotKey scripts in Notepad. And let me zoom in on this guy here. So this looks crazy, and that's because it was poorly written. I call the script floor because the mathematical function for rounding down and getting rid of the decimal points on something is a floor round. So that's why the script ended up with the name floor. And what it does is it sends alt, that's what the exclamation mark is, alt S, alt O. That makes sure that no matter where I have my selection, alt S means that I select the Settings tab, then Alt-O takes me back into Objects. Now I know that if I mash Tab a whole bunch of times, I'll eventually get down here. So that's what you're seeing here. There's a whole bunch of these. Send this like ~T is an escape character, and this is ~T is the shortcut for tab. Of course, this is the very first script I ever wrote. I also realized after the fact that you can just write tab like that, so that's way easier. Also, this is completely unnecessary. I'm sending tab 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times. Okay, so instead of doing this nonsense, I can just say tab 6. There we go. Send tab 6 times. Then I say once I'm in the text box, I hit end, and then backspace. Then I hit tab again, then end, then backspace. And now I've gotten rid of any data that would come after the decimal point. And I was able to rewrite this whole script here. So what was originally 35 lines, when I press F8, then I've got this double colon operator. That's just what AutoHotKey uses. And then in my floor script, you can see this is my crazy long script. So if it detects that I'm in GameMaker, here it is, on a single line, I use if when active. There's my tilde, or well, it's actually the back quote. If I press that key, then I have this branching, I get the window title, and I store it in a variable called window title. And then I use string matching, so in string, to check if I'm in Google Slides, Docs, Sheets, if I'm in any of the other programs that I might be using, if I'm in GameMaker specifically. So here, let me, I mentioned there was that utility Window Spy. Let me pull that up here, just so you can see that this is not in fact malware. If I have GameMaker open and I select this window, you can see Window Spy is telling me that I've got AHK class T room form. Okay, so that's what I reference in here, AHK class T room form. And then I send Alt-S, Alt-O, tab 6, end, backspace twice, tab, end, backspace twice, and that's it. You can see all these semicolons on the end here. This is how you write a comment in AutoHotKey. So that's how I've got these, English text in amongst the other stuff. And I've commented out, in this case, the original script. So all of these sleep commands in here, this was to space out all the hotkeys so that you could see, that's what it looked like when it ran slowly, the very first time I ever pressed it. So that was, let's see, and I'm sure, like, there we go. I had to touch it once and then it broke. That's perfect. So if I press F8, you can see that there's this half second delay between each key press, and there it eventually cleans it up so that it's this size. But then when I got rid of all those sleep commands, there we go, broke again. That's how often it would happen. And I sent this to the software designers and I said, hey, there's this bug. And they said, we can't reproduce it. So, okay, I had to come up with my own solution. So whatever, now I press tilde and it's fixed in like under a second. So that's what I love AutoHotKey. Would it be hard for me to do a live script of a new hotkey? Wouldn't be hard. I just have to pick a subject. So how about chat, feel free to give me a suggestion for a hotkey and I will tell you if it's feasible to do. I will, in the meantime, while people make their suggestions, I'll go back to the script, my crazy long script here. And fundamentally, there it is. Insert is backspace. That's how simple that is. I just type the keyword insert, and then I have the double colon operator, and then I have the word backspace, and now my insert key behaves like a backspace. I also have the scroll lock key remapped to pause play my YouTube music if I'm listening to like a video game soundtrack while I work. I have pause remapped to put the Windows 10 computer to sleep. because the set of hotkeys that I would press is different from Windows 10 to Windows 7. I was actually sticking with Windows 7 for the long time, so that's why this is Windows 10 sleep is distinct. Yeah, let's see. I use this a lot, this get key state alt. This is checking if I have the alt key held down. So if I press tilde and I want one hotkey to trigger, and then I press alt tilde and I want a different hotkey to trigger, that's where I use the alt modifier. So here, I mentioned that I use AutoHotKey to create this exact, the slideshow that you were seeing. Let me bring that over here. This is, of course, completely unrehearsed, but whatever. So here, I've got the word development highlighted, and I want that to be yellow now. And it didn't work because I'm on a different size monitor, like I said. Let's see if I can alt tilde. No, it doesn't want to work, unfortunately. Since I started writing this presentation, Google changed this layout. This didn't used to have little minus and plus buttons. It used to be that you just click on this and you would get your font size. So that bumped things over. It does work on my primary monitor, but for some reason the secondary monitor that I'm using to stream this is a different size. So like I said, using the mouse, there's a prime example of why you don't want to rely on it, because it just fails to work. Let's see. Any suggestions for a hotkey to write? Oh, thank you for linking the AutoHotKey website in the chat there. Jason, do you have a suggestion of something you want me to try writing live?
I've been thinking about it. However, I'm not too well versed in game development myself, so I'm not sure what.
Oh, that's fine.
Not sure what would be a good example of something like that.
Well, it doesn't even have to be game development. It can literally be anything. That's the beauty of AutoHotKey, is that you can, I used it because I was lazy and I didn't want to get up off the bed and come over to the computer and tell Windows to go back to shift focus. Mm-hmm. I guess what I can recommend in the meantime is that people can use, if I go to AutoHotKey. Oh, if you want to find out anything about AutoHotKey, this is the great thing about the program. Let's say AHK and then hot strings. I want to learn more about hot strings. AHK is your, short form for AutoHotKey, and Google knows what you mean. So here, let's learn about hot strings. So this is how rewrite a simple one I've done before, and I can fit it in 15 minutes. Absolutely. Okay, so from scratch, let's get open. I'll pull this over onto my other screen here, and I'll walk through a step-by-step one. Let's pick a good one. Here's a good one. Let's do copy without formatting. Copy, no format. There we go. So one of the functions that you see on my FunctionPad here is copy no format. So the way copy no format works is I want to copy something that might have some formatting associated with it. So if I copy something here and then I go to Google and I paste it, then it's going to be yellow, it's going to have that font, it's going to have everything associated with it. So I made it so that if I press Control-Shift-C, then I can press Control-V, and there it's copied the formatting, kept the center aligned, which is weird, but it ditched the font, it ditched the color. So I find that a lot of the time it's useful for me to copy stuff without formatting from one program to another. Clear recycle bin, if I'm the desktop screen. Yeah, okay. So clear recycle bin, we can do that potentially. Let's go with the copy no format, because I think that's a good general one. I will mention on Windows 10, this is one of my favorite things that I never knew you could do. If you're, let's pop open my recycle bin for a second. There is probably, a couple of things in here. That's fine. So here's my recycle bin. If you use this ribbon view, you can go to the recycle bin tools. You can right-click empty recycle bin and pin it to your bar. So now, no matter what folder you're in, even if this is collapsed, you can click this and you'll empty your recycle bin from any folder. I can be in a completely different folder on my desktop, and I can delete things from my recycle bin from here. So that's pretty handy. So what I would need to do is I would need to figure out a series of keystrokes that would make that happen. So let's get that folder open. And so here's the funny thing about AutoHotKey. So really starting from scratch here, if I right click, I create a new script like this. There is no program in AutoHotKey. It's literally just this right click, create new script. So let's call this copy half, and I'll get back to the recycle bin example if I have time. So I've got copy half here, and I'm going to edit it in Notepad. Notepad++. This is also a free program that you can download and install. I'll zoom in on that. You can see I've got some custom script at the top here, so I'm going to get rid of that. This is one thing I would recommend to everybody. I always put in this thing that if I press Alt-Escape, it exits the script. So that way, if I mess something up as I'm working, it just aborts it and closes the script so that I regain control of my keyboard or my mouse. So let's make it so that F7 is going to perform our copy half. Or actually, how about I recreate that Control-Shift-C? So in AutoHotKey, if I want to say the letter C remaps to some function, which is going to be copy half. First of all, I want it to be Control-Shift-C. So let's pull this back over here, because I never did end up finding. Let's see. Copy. Come on. You know you can find the word copy. What's wrong? Copy. I'm just having trouble finding the original script here, but I'm sure I can get it. Okay. Copy text, remove formatting. That's what I called the function. So the very first thing I want to do is I want to, since the hotkey interrupts the regular like Windows Control-C, I want to send Control-C. So that like this symbol here, which I guess some people refer to as a like, it's whatever you get when you press Shift-6. That is how you send a Control key. And then I want to sleep for 150 milliseconds. This is because I found that if you start messing with the clipboard while without letting much time pass, it will just not work. Now I want to do this is the magic here. I want to say clipboard, which is a special reserved keyword, colon equals clipboard. And this is a bit of black magic. This is what takes whatever is on your clipboard and reassigns it to the special clipboard variable. And this on its own will make it so that all the formatting is just gone. You basically get plain text saved back into the clipboard. And then I just complete that with the return key. Now, of course, I don't want this to trigger when I just press the C key anytime. I want it to happen when I press Control-Shift-C. So Shift is the plus symbol, and for complete reference, Alt is the exclamation mark. So in theory, if I save this copy half script, I'm going to double click on it to run it, and it shows up in my taskbar on the other monitor. Let's highlight some text, maybe from my slideshow. So here, I got the word accelerate. I'm going to press Control-Shift-Alt-C, which is actually really hard to do because it's 4 characters with one hand. But I got it. So let's go over to here. And if I enter on a new line here and paste, there we go. I've got the word accelerate without the yellow formatting. Now, just to prove that that's actually working and not just a fluke, if I just press regular old Control-C and then Control-V, I've got the word accelerate with the formatting preserved. So there we go. That's a live example of creating the copy half script. Yeah, okay. Well, so thanks to everybody for participating in this presentation. I wasn't really expecting to get into the syntax here, but thank you so much to the the XP game. Development Summit for giving me the opportunity to give this presentation. And special thanks to Jason for giving me this opportunity.